These guys are giving me a very hard time because I hate public speaking. Who hates public speaking? Okay, I do it because I'm an extrovert for pay. So that's why I'm here today, and you guys are going to be very patient with my nerves, okay? After about 90 seconds, I'm actually feeling a lot better. All right, so let's run through a little exercise first. Raise your hand. How many of you have had someone in the past year send you an AI created prototype? Okay, keep your hands up. Keep your hand up if you knew exactly what prompt generated it. Okay, how many of you knew what problem it was trying to solve? I don't see any hands still. I'm gonna keep going though. How many of those prototypes ultimately went into a product with absolutely zero changes? More than should, yes. All right, so AI did not eliminate the need for alignment. It really eliminated the friction that used to reveal the misalignment. So the easiest thing in product development has really become building something and building it quickly. But the hardest thing is making sure that we're aligned along the way. So before I jump in, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Kelly Lucas, Chief Design Officer and co-founder at Lunar Lab. We're a UX design and product strategy company in Innovation Depot, so right here in Birmingham. I've been working in UX for years and years, close to 20 now if we're counting. But I've worked across a whole bunch of different industries, fintech, healthcare, social media, like you name it. I've probably worked in it in some shape, way, shape, or form. So I've spent a lot of time these days working on trading platforms, which is really fun. But it's a large enterprise product, and they're trying to integrate AI into their design and development processes, which is great, but it comes with challenges, right? So what's interesting about my job is that it has really, really changed, especially over the last year, but really the last few years. I'm sure that yours has as well. So this talk actually didn't exist a month ago, which is why I asked for your patience, because I actually just wrote it this week. Because all of this has really come up in the last month of my life. So it has really changed the way that I've had to work, which also changed my talk. So I submitted the name of a talk a few months ago. It got accepted, and I was like, what exactly do I want to talk about? And then all of this happened. So I'm excited to talk about it today. So I'm spending a lot less time now, like designing screens, right? As you can imagine. These days, I'm really talking a lot more about alignment and problems and priorities and trade-offs and outcomes and success measures for anything that is being built, which is still reflective of what my job used to be, but I'll go into some details on how it's changed. So like I said, that's really what led to this talk, because from where I sit, AI isn't creating a design problem or a development problem. It's definitely making our work faster, but it's also shining a light on an alignment problem that was already there. So like I said, I know I promised you a talk about AI, but this talk isn't really about AI at all. It's about what happens when the cost of creating solutions approaches zero. Okay. So back in my day, when I started working in UX, like I said, roughly 20 years ago, building things was expensive, designing things was expensive, coding things was expensive. And because it was expensive, teams really spent a lot of time talking about what problems are we solving for, and who is this for? What are the requirements? What does success look like? Now, today, our daily work really looks like this. A product manager creates a prototype, and then an engineer creates a prototype, and then an executive creates a prototype, and then a designer creates a prototype, and everyone uses AI, and everyone is solving a completely different problem. Now, our teams spend weeks trying to figure out which version were we supposed to build? Which one should we actually be building? And this is all before anybody has answered any of these problems. Is this the right problem? Is this the right workflow? Does this align with our existing product? How does it fit into the existing product? And what are people actually needing and requiring of our product? So recently, I heard somebody bragging that they created 6 mobile apps on a flight. Sounds bold. Were they solving 6 different problems? Did they actually talk to 6 different users? Did they validate 6 different opportunities, or did they just write some opinions in code? Some might call it a hobby, right? But this, for years, we really assumed that software was constrained by our ability to build. And to an extent, it was, right? We treated technical execution as really the competitive advantage. And now AI is really forcing us to confront something really uncomfortable, I think. Building was never the moat. Knowing what to build was the moat. So what actually creates competitive advantage? Again, 20 years ago, if I wanted to build software, what stopped us? Resources, money, people, engineers, infrastructure, all of these things, distribution. But now a founder or an executive at a larger company, and anyone else can generate wireframes, code, copy, marketing assets, prototypes, all before lunch, right? So if everyone can build, then what is actually creating this differentiation? And it's not the execution. Everyone can now execute, right? It's judgment. So the ability to decide which problems matter and which opportunities are worth pursuing and which trade-offs are acceptable and what not to build, those really become pivotal. Software was meant to be built methodically if you were lucky. Discovery usually happened first. We might gather some requirements, we might align some stakeholders, clarify some goals, identify problems, move into the research stage where we're trying to figure out what actually exists and how can we improve upon it. The design phase where we might explore some solutions that really solve those key problems that we've identify any of the technical constraints that exist. And then we move into development where we have clearly written user stories, quality code, and end-to-end testing, as we should, right? To be clear, the old process was not perfect, right? I think everybody can agree that is an imperfect process. A lot of projects failed. None of that has really changed. The requirements changed, sometimes a little bit, and stakeholders maybe disagreed, sometimes a lot. But the disagreements tended to surface themselves sooner. The process was slower, but the output was clearer. That slowness is what really created some checkpoints. And there were requirements and design reviews and architecture discussions and technical planning. And all of those discussions really revealed the misalignment. So this might be a very hot take, but in my opinion, I think maybe we removed the wrong friction in the process. So everyone is now celebrating, look how quickly we can build. But nobody stops to ask, what did we stop doing in order to speed things up? So AI removed the cost of generating solutions, but what it did not do is remove the need for shared understanding. So the misalignment became easier to hide. And now we've removed the mechanisms that we used to use to expose those disagreements. So I want to try something. Imagine that your CEO walks into the room tomorrow and says, we need to build a dashboard. Who hasn't heard that, right? So that's the entire requirement. You ready to go? All right, so what does that dashboard contain? Does it contain revenue? Is it support metrics? Is it operational health? Customer retention? So now imagine that I ask a designer and a product manager and an engineer and the VP of sales and an executive on the team to build a dashboard. Do they build the same thing? Of course not. So now imagine I give all of those people Claude. So now they come to the room and they have built 4 very polished dashboards in less than an hour. The disagreement did not disappear, right? It just got hidden behind a really pretty UI, which looks very functional. So that dashboard, again, looks highly polished and it's very interactive and it looks like an end product. And that's really what makes the alignment, I think, harder than ever. So 20 years ago, you might have seen an executive come into a meeting with a doodle on a napkin, which everyone understood that it is a doodle on a napkin that can easily go in the trash can, but it is there to visualize something or to communicate something, but it's a sketch. But now in the same amount of time, you've got a whole product that somebody is coming and showing you and saying, here is my rough sketch. Except they don't say it's a rough sketch, right? It's You're like, oh, this is like a real thing. Did you already launch it? So just because something looks complete doesn't mean that we've agreed on what we're building. So before it was define, align, design, and build. And today it is build and then argue some more and then maybe argue some more and then reverse engineer it. And then we're going to align. So the pattern that I'm seeing is that the work is still taking just as long. We've kind of promised that things are going to speed up, when in fact, when they get into end users' hands, they really haven't sped up. It's just that it's happening in a very different sequence than how it used to. And this is causing absolutely massive chaos in organizations. The bigger the organization, the bigger the chaos, the more people have Claude. It's just nutty. Like I said, I did not have this talk a month ago. This has all come up in the last month of my work life, which is just wild. So I want to give you a real example from my day job. So one of our clients is a very large fintech company. Like I said, it's building trading platforms. This is not a startup. This is like a Bloomberg competitor. Like they're an absolutely massive company. And we're not talking about a few developers. We're talking about hundreds of developers and multiple product teams and thousands of employees. Absolutely huge company. And recently, they rolled out AI prototyping capabilities connected directly to Figma and directly to our corporate design system, which in some ways is great. But now, whenever a new feature comes up, everyone can prototype, and I do mean everyone. Product managers and engineers and architects and, again, leaders and designers. And the barrier to creating these really polished looking solutions is basically gone. And at first, that all sounds amazing, and in some ways, it truly is. But historically, if you wanted to explore 10 ideas, you needed 10 times the resources. And now, like I said, you can create 10 ideas before lunch. But the problem is that every time that a feature comes up, I end up with 10 prototype links. Literally, 10 different versions of the exact same idea, except they're not, right? But what's fascinating to me is that they all look remarkably similar. And you end up spending a lot more time trying to decipher the differences. So it's the same design system. It is the same components, the same visual quality, the same level of polish. And if you just glance at them, you would think everyone agreed. But when you actually look at them closer, they're really solving a very different problem. One prototype is optimized for speed, and another is optimized for risk management. Another might be focused on reporting or changing the workflow entirely, or it is now lumped into a workflow that you had no idea was even relevant to the thing you were originally talking about. And they're all answers. They're just answers to very different questions, because now every product owner has a prototype, and they also have an AI generated requirements document, which often comes after the prototype, which is interesting. And then they all have a different vision for what needs to be built. So the conversation really changes from can we prototype to which of these, like Vanna White style, is actually going to solve a trader's problem. And that's really a much harder question to answer from an organizational level. So what happens next is something that I think probably a lot of people are facing right now, and definitely a lot of organizations, is that we spend sometimes days or weeks comparing prototypes and comparing requirements and comparing assumptions, and then trying to identify where do they overlap and where are the red herrings and who did this one. And then trying to determine, like, what do we actually need to keep and how does any of this correlate with actual user needs, and which parts are just based on somebody's, like, didn't get enough sleep last night. And eventually we get to the same place where we always needed to get to, which is a shared understanding of the problem, clear requirements, validated workflows, and agreement on what success looks like. The difference is that we're doing it after we have generated so many solutions. And I really think that that's going to be key when we talk about token utilization, because if we're just generating, that's going to be a very expensive problem, right? So this is really where I started to realize something. The part of the process that got dramatically faster wasn't really the bottleneck. the prototyping got faster and the mock-ups got faster and building design systems and documentation and all of those things and generating ideas got a lot faster, but I haven't seen the delivery timeline shrink by the same amount, and not even close. We're still spending a lot of time on the thing that we've always spent a lot of time on, which is creating shared understanding and alignment and decision making and trade-offs. My this is wild. My client even has an internal dashboard, leaderboard of who is using the most AI. And that's not, it's sort of a criticism. It's not really criticism, but because I do think that experimentation is important, right? But if we're measuring prompts generated or prototypes generated or screens generated, I think we're really measuring the wrong thing. The metric that I would really love to see is like how quickly can a team reach shared understanding and deliver on it? Because that's the thing that really determines whether the feature actually ships successfully, right? So not how quickly somebody generated the first prototype. Like it's not a race to a finish line. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of organizations are making right now. We're measuring how much faster we can produce solutions when the harder question to answer always has been, how have we gotten any faster at agreeing on the problem? So whether you're a designer or a developer or product manager, architect, engineer, leader, all of the above, we're really all facing the same challenge. So with AI, there's a much finer line, I think, between a lot of our roles than there traditionally has been. And designing screens is still important. It's important to me, it's important to products, but it's not the highest leverage thing I think I can do or we can do. The most valuable thing I think that we can do is creating that shared understanding before anybody begins building anything. So the value then becomes creating shared understanding. Can everyone explain the problem in the same way? Improve decision making. Can we explain why we're building something? Can we evaluate trade-offs? And how do we optimize for that? And then defining outcomes, like how do we know we actually succeeded? So the value is in creating clarity. And I think AI can generate interfaces, but I think it fails miserably at creating organizational alignment because that's a people problem. So in order to prevent the post-prototype realignment fiasco, I like to ask the following 4 questions, which seem kind of simple, but I do think that they can provide a really valuable filter to your thinking. So can everyone define the problem the same way? If people can't define the problem the same way, then you do not have alignment. Number 2, is AI solving the user's problems or our uncertainty? If you're using AI because nobody knows what the workflow should be, you do not have alignment. Number 3, if 5 people wrote a prompt, would they build the same thing? If 5 people would not build the same thing, you do not have alignment. Number 4, are we evaluating solutions before agreeing on success? So if you don't know how you're going to measure success, you definitely don't have alignment. So I want to leave you with something practical today. So instead of another framework that you might forget by tomorrow, I created a very short prompt that you can steal. So the QR code links to it. You can paste it right into your product or into Claude. So anytime that you get a product idea or a feature request or a dashboard request, whatever it is you're working on, I want you to identify the assumptions and the missing requirements and stakeholder alignment risks, any undefined success metrics that you're not aware of, and really any questions that need to be answered before building. In other words, this is going to help expose the things that teams usually discover about halfway through development. So the irony is that AI is incredibly good at generating answers, but most organizations don't really have an answer problem. They have a question problem. I like to think of myself as a professional question asker, and I think we all should be. So they're really answering questions that haven't even been fully agreed on yet. And that's why I think the highest leverage use of AI at this point isn't really generating solutions, it's helping teams uncover ambiguity before they invest any time in building the wrong thing. So what actually matters? To summarize, what I think matters a lot less these days are wireframes and mockups and screens and prototype generation. And what I think really, really matters at this juncture is alignment and problem definition and shared understanding, prioritization, and decision making. And AI is never going to solve organizational ambiguity. So for years, we believed that software development was really constrained by our ability to build, but AI proved otherwise, right? Again, building was never the bottleneck. I think alignment was. And in a world where anybody can really generate an AI solution, that shared understanding becomes your competitive advantage. All right, that is it. Thank you. Thank you. Um, I've got about 8 minutes left, so I want to leave plenty of time for any Q&A that anybody might have. Yeah. Yeah. You're not oh. Nice try, though.
This was wonderful. This was a really good talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your nerves were not clear to us. um, I'm curious about how you think about integrating AI in your design process, like outside of stakeholders. Like, okay, I'm about to start a project. Like, where do I fit AI in? And like, where do I stop using AI and then you start using my discernment?
That's such a good question because I do think that it I'll give my traditional UX answer. It depends. I do think it depends, but I tend to find it really helpful in the analysis stage. I'll give you an example. In the client I was mentioning earlier, look, I'm not a trader. Never worked as a trader. I feel like an absolute idiot half the time when I'm like, I know nothing about fixed income trading, but can you like dumb it down about 17 more levels? But what I can do is ask AI and say, hey, give me a day in the life of a trader where you're treating it as a hypothesis. It's not a fact. I'm not sitting there validating it with someone because it's very hard to get in touch with people that are using these systems sometimes. But I think it can be a good gut check in testing some assumptions that I make as I'm designing. So I might say, I'm about to design this feature, and I think that speed is most important to a trader. And I might ask it a few things like, what are, a trader's biggest goals? And is speed important to them? And, asking it a few questions. Again, they might be wrong, but what I can do is design for those assumptions. And when I go to design reviews and I'm showing it to product people who maybe haven't had the time to share the knowledge that I need in order to design, I can say, I thought that we were designing for speed, but what I realize is, risk is actually much more important because if you make a bad trade, you might lose millions of dollars. I'm like, okay, so speed wasn't the thing that, okay, I thought it was like a fast moving thing. Maybe it's not. And so I think it can be very helpful in those circumstances where you're trying to, I guess, broaden your understanding in something that you have a hard time filling in otherwise. I don't think it's the only way. I mean, I'll be the first to say if you can go sit down with an actual trader or whoever it is that you're designing for, like please go do that first. And then see how it aligns with, your AI buddy that you're asking questions of. The other part that I use it a lot for is even just rough copywriting. I'm not a copywriter. I can do an okay job, but I like using it for like rough drafts where if we're working with, a startup founder who is also not a copywriter and maybe doesn't do the best job either, we can at least have a rough draft. It's very difficult to go to someone who where writing isn't their maybe the forte. You just give them a blank sheet of paper and you're like, hey, write me some landing page copy. And they're like, what? But instead you can say, look, I took a stab at this. It's not perfect. You still have to like do some work to update it and like make it sound like a real person and not AI. But I mean, I think it can be one helpful piece. But going to the other extreme is incorporating it into the actual design flow. Like Figma MCP has, their integration now, which can be very helpful in some respects. But I still find myself fighting that quite a bit. So I don't think that's like the easiest part. Yeah.
Hello, yes, it was a very cool and insightful presentation. I just wanted to ask, it seems like you have a lot of experience in the tech world, and I was wondering what's your favorite area in the tech world that you've worked in or what pushed you the hardest?
Oh God. Oh, I think fintech has definitely pushed me the hardest. It's so funny because I worked at FIS years ago, and they build all kinds of banking systems. And the first one that I worked on was securities settlement process. So like everything that happens after a trade is made. And I remember going to my first design session, and I had come from healthcare, and I was like, I got this. I can figure this out. And they were like, I need you to design me a dashboard. I shit you not. That was the first thing. They were like, for a trader. I was like, "Oh, okay, well, what am I doing?" And they're like, design me, I need a table that shows positions. And I was like, what is a position? I was like, okay. They're like, well, this needs to be a list of stocks. I was like, what does a stock look like? So, it's kind of a crash course in, domain experience. But even that doesn't necessarily translate. Like that was all stocks that I was working on. And now I'm working in the bond world, which is totally different. Different traders did different everything. So I think that that has probably been the biggest learning curve. But I think any industry that's really heavy in acronyms, so if you work in defense or banking, or they love their acronyms and they don't translate at all between. So you're just kind of thrown in the deep end and just learn as quickly as you can. Thank you. Anyone
Um,
else?
I sort of have my own theory on the question that I'm about to ask you, and it may be a little bit controversial,
Yeah.
but seeing I completely agree with your entire presentation, first of all,
Thank
as
you.
a product designer. So my question is, why does every other department around product feel so empowered to do our job?
Yeah.
Like, so, and my question, and the reason why I ask is because we
Yeah.
know the importance of design thinking. We know
Yeah.
the importance of systems thinking. We know the
Yeah.
importance of doing the research, doing the testing. So, what are we not doing that's making these people think that we shouldn't be in the room?
Yeah, it's such a funny, that's a great question. Because it can often feel like we're not doing our job right. Because they're like, why did they just do it instead of like coming to talk to me? And it's because we let them. The technology lets them, right? So we've like democratized our jobs, which again, I think in some ways is like great because I do think it can be very helpful in the circumstance where this gentleman asked me to design a positions table. If he could have come to me and said, this is what I meant, would have been so much faster, right? However, I don't know that we're ever going to get back out of this, which I think is going to be a challenge, right? Um, I don't even know how to answer this, to be quite frank. Because I think that there's still an element to needing to collaborate, right? I mean, that at the end of the day, that's the thing that matters the most is if this person wants to create a prototype and then come show me, great, but I need them to be able to articulate the why. Just like I need to be able to articulate the why. Like that piece did not go away. But it's a lot more like, why design this? Why can't you just use this? I'm like, because I don't know what it's doing. Like the developers also don't know what it's doing. I just want to know the why. Like Alyssa and I joke a lot in our day to day, like, please just send me the prompt first. You can also send the prototype, but like send the prompt along with it, please, because I don't know what you asked it to do. And I joke that our job becomes like a game of Clue. And I'm like, why is Colonel Mustard holding a spatula in the basement? Like, how did it come out like this? What happened? I don't know if that answered your question, but I definitely think it's just going to be a struggle that we have to figure out how to be involved in that process to make sure that these answers get or these questions get answered for everyone, not just for us. Because again, my day-to-day job these days, a lot of times is trying to fill out tickets with the missing like answers. It's like, well, why did we do this? Well, I don't know. And they're like, well, this is the prototype. I'm like, but I didn't make that. So they're coming to me asking because they're like, well, this is the design, right? I'm like, yeah, go ask him. I don't know. I don't know what he did. Yeah.
I will echo that this was a phenomenal presentation.
Thank you.
Your nerves were not visible at all. I'm super excited to distribute your prompt to our team, but I am curious. I've worked in mostly fintech and edtech before starting our companies, and I don't think I've ever worked in an environment where we had that shared or common understanding. And when we did, it rarely went beyond the immediate team, our engineering team, the design team, wherever. So how can is there a path where we can utilize AI to help kind of share that knowledge and create that common understanding? Or how do you create it? I mean, the answer is probably because we didn't have a lunar lab, right? But
Absolutely.
so like when you still struggle with that as an organization, I wonder how you can find that shared common understanding while still utilizing things like AI.
Yeah, I mean, look, my favorite answer to doing any of this is like starting with a workshop, and that is literally just getting people into a room or virtual room or Zoom or however you need to do it, and like just asking the questions and getting the answers and writing them down. Because you can pop anything into AI, but it's not going to solve that organizational problem, right? Again, you've got 10 people in 10 different rooms who haven't had a conversation about anything, but you're suddenly talking about a requirements document. And like that's not, you can try and hash it out that way, but in like a 1 hour session, I think you could get a lot further and have more clarity amongst everyone, because then you can start like divvying out things to do, right? Um, I mean, I do think that having checks in place that are making sure you don't go too far down the solution route before you've had those conversations can just be a good checks and balance, right? So before it gets into a JIRA, you've got something that's like, psst, have you answered all of these questions yet? Because if not, like start here, right? Go back to the beginning. Yeah. Thank you.
Kelly Lucas, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.